Matt and Lisa, thank you so much for inviting me to the family reunion. I'm I'm just here for the witty banter. And
Perfect.
and during the witty banter, I was trying to calculate the number of total years around this Zoom call of ITSM experience, and I lost count. But it's a really large number. Um, I've been in and around this space for about 35 years. Um, I know Matt's got quite a few years under his belt as well, as does Lisa. And so does my friend Rocky. So um, it is just an absolute pleasure to be able to spend a few minutes with this group. Matt, Lisa, thanks for hosting Open Service Community. Um, there are only friends I know and friends I haven't met yet on this call. So for the friends that I haven't yet met, I'll give a brief background. 600 years. That's actually probably not far off. A brief background, and then I'll share a few thoughts with you, and then try to make sure I leave time for us to have a little discussion. That's really the fun part. Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain. PeopleRain is the seventh company I've started in and around this space of applying AI and machine learning to delivering better work experiences. First company I started was back in the 90s called Aeroprise. Um, we didn't call it AI back then. We called them recommender systems, and a lot of it was heuristics based. But we had a vision back in the 90s. One of my investors later said it was a long road to an overnight success. We got acquired by a company that at the time was considered one of the big four in systems management called BMC Software. Um, it's crazy to even say it, but it's possible that some people on this podcast don't even remember the Remedy days, but maybe you don't know what AR stands for, the Action Request System. But for those of us that do, open up the time capsule. Um, those were good years. Those were good years. My second company was acquired by it was a startup at the time called ServiceNow. That's where I met Matt. Matt was a customer of ours back at the time when Matt can attest. It really was a scrappy startup. Maybe not so much anymore, but it's been a good journey. I left ServiceNow to start a company called Big Panda. Silly name, amazing company in the IT automation space. Um, Having a great run. Uh, I left Big Panda in part to pursue what has always been a life's passion, which is impacting how the next billion employees get work done, and that's PeopleRain. So PeopleRain, we aim to give every employee back 4 to 6 hours of productive time per week. We do it through a combination of human first AI. It's empathetic. It's been pre-trained to automate about the 5,000 most common employee service tasks. We take great pride in using AI responsibly and always making sure that we put the human in the center of the service universe. I feel like for too long, we've let the tools dictate the behaviors that we require from our employees. It shouldn't be the way it is. It should be the opposite. The tools should be smart enough to adapt themselves to the way people actually work. Um, that's People Reign. We haven't yet impacted a billion lives, but we're well on our way. Um, Matt mentioned on the side, my passion project, I host a podcast called AI and the Future of Work. We've published over 350 episodes. We have a community of over 1 million listeners. It started off 6 years ago as just a selfish way for me to get an hour a week with some of my heroes and my role models. And at some point, I decided if they were willing to be generous enough with their time, then I owe it to the world to press record and share those conversations. And a thing happened, and that's AI and the future of work. So the remarks I'd prepared for today were just some insights from things I've learned, but a lot of things that I've learned from the podcast and from great guests. So with that as a little bit of a preamble, I promise no death by PowerPoint, but I did think a few slides would be helpful to structure the conversation. And if I know how to share, then you're seeing a deck.
Got
Yep.
it.
And I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about some perspectives that I have, but again, mostly what I've learned from others in terms of what we can expect and why it just may be that while the next 3 years may change our perception, our our relationship with work more than the previous 300 have, that just may be a good thing for humanity. And so just engage me in that thought experiment for a few minutes. So some of the key questions I would like us to consider over the next few minutes. How is AI impacting society? What are leaders doing differently now? Equally important, what does it mean to be a leader? In an era when potentially your colleague or your team's colleagues may be bots. What does it mean to practice AI responsibly? What's the future of work? And equally important, the big question, how is AI impacting us as a species? I'm not sure if you bargained for this kind of breakfast talk, but bear with me. Bear with me. This stuff's pretty important. And if we're not having the conversation here, then someone's having it without us. So might as well be us that are being the leaders. It's the first time that we've encountered a technology that kind of strips us all to our bare humanity. Um, when you think about when you got a cell phone or other, your first laptop, you didn't really like boot up the cell phone and be like, oh my gosh, this is the end of humanity. You know, talking on the phone has never been the same, and therefore, it's the end of the human race. No, I mean, it was a very helpful technology, and we found good ways to build apps and build operating systems and fit it into our lives. But for the first time, artificial intelligence is like holding a mirror up to ourselves, and it's forcing us to ask the big questions. Why am I here? Like, really, like, why am I here? And all of a sudden, when you see technology that looks and acts like it may be able to do things that you thought your degree uniquely enabled you to do, it forces you to ask some big questions. Um, well, as a leader, something to be aware of is those are the questions that your teams are asking. And you have a choice. You can either explore those questions with them, or you can not. And those questions, those kind of threats, that apprehension will happen on its own in the place of work. I encourage us as leaders, as people who care about humans, and I hope as we'll all consider ourselves members of Team Human, we're on the right side of innovation, and we do the right thing when it comes to redefining what it means to be a leader. We've been here before. I referenced 300 years ago. That wasn't arbitrary. That's around when the first revolution was. And even before that, we had disruptive technologies like the printing press, which was, gosh, that was a really, it was a tough period if you were a hand scribe. Um, the arc of history has shown that, we're very thankful that that we have had the printing press, maybe less by the day, but, and nobody, regrets the loss of hand scribes. We have the automobile and it replaced horse and buggies. And we all enjoy visiting museums and learning about horses and buggies, but in general, the automobile and the airplane and telephones instead of needing switchboard operators, these have all been seen as progress over time, even though they were extremely disruptive. Those of us who are truly old, which I think is a lot of us on this call, and I mean that as a compliment. Remember when the browser threatened pretty much everybody in the world of print media, and it turns out on the other side of that story, I think we'd agree it's good that we have the web. Turns out, newsflash, it's actually created a lot of jobs, and we celebrate the fact that these innovations have been embraced. We're at the cusp of another disruptive innovation, and I mentioned why this one might be a little bit different. But let's not forget, as humans, we've been here before, and as I mentioned, if you're on the right side of innovation, you're going to be the ones who will be celebrated when a version of us is on this slide at some point. So I put the slides together so I get to define what the quadrants are, and here's how I think about the four phases of this just kind of cataclysmic shift toward cognitive-based computing is taking place as much as over a decade ago. It sounds like a long time ago in the span of technology, but for those of us who lived through it, it's actually not that long ago. We saw the rise of classical machine learning. So it was pretty mind-boggling that you could feed, let's say, trouble ticket data into a model, train it on the patterns in the data, and then feed it some data or some information that it had never seen before, and get an amazingly accurate prediction. It worked in the early days for doing things like predicting who's the best person to service a trouble ticket or predicting the MTTR for a ticket of a certain type, but also obviously in many other domains. From this mammogram, can we guess, if this is a patient with breast cancer, things like that. That was classical machine learning. It led to a period where we could do very accurate forecasting. And that's where you would quite literally have a team of data scientists, data engineers. You'd need teams who were skilled in the field of machine learning. We hadn't yet applied language. Nobody really thought that you could take what was essentially a numeric pursuit, a math pursuit, a stats pursuit, and apply language to it because language is inherently not based on numbers. Unless maybe it is. And it turns out if you vectorize words, you can actually come up with a numeric representation for those words. And here was the magic. We had LLMs, large language models, when Google published the seminal paper in 2017 about large language models, basically saying if you looked at the numeric value of words in vector space, you could look at we call it lexical proximity, but you could look at the distance between those numbers in vector space, and you could actually tell how closely related the words are to each other. And thought experiment here, if you knew the lexical proximity of the words, maybe you could guess what the next likely word is in a sentence. And all of a sudden, Cambrian explosion of what we now call AI that's language-based. Once we had that ability to predict the next word or token in a sentence, we could then go out and give those same AIs some agency. The reason we talk about agentic as really a point on a spectrum is because depending on how much agency we give the AI to do various tasks, it both associates with more risk, but also more capabilities. But it really is a range of behaviors. And so we're just now starting to get comfortable with the idea that you might be willing to give an AI agent a task, an objective, have it go out and do some work independently. But if there weren't LLMs and if there weren't this ability to translate words into numbers, we wouldn't have agentic AI, and we wouldn't be able to dream big enough to think about an era when AI allows us to have metacognition. And that's where you can think about kind of AI as an appendage and as an extension of our own humanity. You'll see that I used my words very carefully. I said it's an extension. So a few things I want you to keep in mind. AI only knows what we train it. We get to choose how and when to use AI. If we're smart enough to develop these emergent properties, we're also smart enough to know when to turn it off. These agentic systems, AI-based systems, are not sentient. Don't believe what you read in the press. They don't have feelings. They don't have emotions. They don't bleed. They don't cry. So let's not get caught up in the tendency to anthropomorphize them. It only hurts Team Human. All right. But as a source of inspiration, as a way to augment the things that humans don't naturally do well, think of AI as being a thought partner. Think of AI as being a way to augment some of the places where we're deficient. I'm going to give you an example. I frequently talk about what U to the power of AI actually means. And consider that everyone in every place of work today is feeling a little bit destabilized. Maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 85%, but everyone's feeling a little bit destabilized because they're asking what's left for me to do. Well, I would say that U to the power of AI, you as a leader, means that you got to get comfortable asking, how will thinking machines augment me? What could me unconstrained look like? How might I be able to change the world? What's my superpower? And equally important, it's okay to question how and what your field will look like in 2, 5, 10 years. That's what leaders are doing. Leaders accept the status quo and feel threatened by new technologies. Leaders are caught measuring productivity based on how many human labor hours are put in. We no longer punch clocks. Even if you're a lawyer, you no longer punch a clock because we now know that the measure of output, let's say from your lawyer or any service provider, it's not the number of hours that they sit and bill you for their time. There's a lot of thought work that they can do with the help of augmented intelligence. That's how productivity will be measured in the future. Outcomes will not necessarily be bounded by the traditional limitations of humans. This feels kind of academic, so I tested some of my own wordiness, not with the old slide, but with that slide. So I actually took a case study and I tried to take something that was very relatable. And I wanted to see if we applied this methodology to um, physical drivers of cars today. What's that field look like and how might it change over the next decade? And it turned out this is not a field, it's not like IT service management, it's not employee service. I didn't have any unfair advantage here, but I did some research and I was fascinated by the results. Today, self-driving vehicles, SDVs, are available to drive about 0.01% of daily commute miles. And Uber and Lyft together in the United States employ about 8.1 million humans to drive cars. There's been all manner of hue and cry about what happens to those 8.1 million human drivers as we see. I think I'm the only one in the Bay Area right now, but as we see San Francisco, there are truly more Waymos than there are people driving cars. And so you do get a glimpse of the future. And thought experiment, let's think about what does 10 years look like? We now actually have data that we can use to give an assessment to that. Expect 1,500% coverage in terms of where commute miles, daily commute miles that will be able to be trafficked by self-driving cars. The 8.1 million humans driving Ubers, Lyfts, their own cars, taxis, etc. It may be disappointing to know that there will be far fewer people who will pay to drive cars, but there will be many, many more people employed in service of getting people to where they're going. Over 100 million people will be needed to serve the commuting population. And when you think about, everybody who's going to be needed to redesign roads and traffic laws and rethink urban planning and design the vehicles, the self-driving vehicles, and maintain them, and think about how they make decisions and clean up the data and make sure that they're collecting miles in places where self-driving cars have never been, expanding, around the globe, building in safety protocols for these self-driving vehicles, and on and on and on. Apply that way of thinking to your field, and I think you'll find you'll come up with similar math. It's likely that every field might have 10 times the need, or the capacity for humans to do hopefully better work, higher paying work, fewer jobs that fit the 3 Ds. They're dull, they're dirty, or they're dangerous. You know what? It's okay if some of those go away because in their place will appear jobs that are much better fits for humans. So be on Team Human, celebrate the fact that your field will be disrupted in a positive way. So if we think about our slice of the world, delivering exceptional employee experiences, these are all things that these all come from people-oriented success stories. So this is not science fiction here. Hopefully, a lot of you are already engaged in delivering more value as a service provider in some of these. Who do we hire? What are the attributes of an ideal employee that's most likely to be successful here? It's a data problem. Let's use the data to hire teams of people that are prepared to do the best work of their lives at our companies. Let's make it frictionless to onboard them. Let's be there with concierge-like premium service when they have questions, technology questions, benefits questions, payroll questions. Every employee that asks one of those types of questions, I can guarantee you someone has asked it before. It's a data problem. If you could catalog the way all of these questions are asked and how all these services are delivered, and wrap it around all the common systems that are used to deliver those services, you could get really, really good at using automation to create truly a ticketless world. Nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, you know what, today's going to be awesome because I'm going to submit 3 trouble tickets. And I can't wait. I can't wait for the help desk to give me a number and put me in a queue. No, but if everyone said, I feel empowered to solve my own problems. And, this is the best experience I've ever had. It's better than, anything I get in in my life as a consumer. We're right on the cusp of that in the world of what it means to be an employee. How we manage, track assets, how we manage and track vendors. Think of hyper-personalized learning experiences, the whole world of learning and L&D, learning and development, the whole world of the LMS, the learning management system. Those will seem antiquated in 2 to 3 years. How we measure performance, how we guide employees about how to be their best selves at work. Just think about all the signal that we're missing today that we could use to coach employees, upskilling and reskilling. There's going to be a lot of that required to get from those, call it, 8 million in the driver scenario to 100 million jobs. A lot of new skills out there, a lot of new technologies to learn, a lot of new leadership opportunities. And of course, automating the offboarding process. These are just a handful of things that come up for us daily. So if you extrapolate from any of these, there is the equivalent of that 100 million, Cambrian explosion on the way of new opportunities to make work life better. So I put together this quadrant to help us think about some of the big questions. I mentioned, kind of in that opening slide, you know, um, the existential conversations that we're ending up having. Expect more, not less of those. And expect as a leader that you don't need to be an expert in all of these, but you should be comfortable understanding that these things are happening all around us. Again, my slide, I got to choose the axes, including the dates. Um, Matt might be able to attest. Not that long ago, that 2050 on the y-axis was 2100, genuinely. And over a period of maybe 6 to 9 months, it's now 2050. We may be having a version of this conversation in a year, and we may decide it's 2030. I don't know, but I do know that this stuff is happening quickly. And it's more important than ever on the x-axis to think about everything from things that are very pragmatic to things that are existential. And understand that, we're all living through this global experiment together. So because you feel apprehensive, you know what? It makes you a human. Um, and you're apprehensive the same way your colleagues are. So let's embrace that uncertainty. IP ownership, starting from the left. Who owns works derived from artificial intelligence? It's an open question. We've litigated it before, but it doesn't matter the way we litigated before because it's different this time around. So we should get comfortable having the conversation. Be aware that AI is perfectly designed to replicate human bias. Let's get comfortable holding algorithms accountable. There's a fascinating new field. Talk about one where there are going to be a lot of new jobs created. Let's get comfortable as humans holding the developers of the algorithms and the way the algorithms operate accountable for the downstream impact they have. Who's a publisher and who's a distributor? Well, we thought we fully litigated this in the courts that if you're a distributor, like say Google, you're actually not responsible for the content that you index. So there are a lot of dark examples about people did unintended things based on content that Google made very easy to discover. And it was determined that Google was not responsible for the things that they surfaced. Well, I just ask us to apply the same logic and you can come to your own conclusion, but it might be a little different when you're talking about an LLM and a derived work from a bunch of different works. Maybe it is the case that the vendor of the LLM, the owner of the algorithm, may have to be held accountable for the outcome of that derivative work. Just a thought experiment. The geopolitics of AI, obviously fascinating topic, something we certainly won't fully unpack in this conversation. We need to get comfortable, not just holding the algorithm accountable, but making sure that any decision made on our behalf by AI is explainable. Today, those decisions are typically not. We've become way too complacent, having decisions about our healthcare, our financial decisions, loan applications, where our kids go to school, what resources they have access to. We don't always know which algorithms were used to influence or make those decisions. We're allowed to ask. Privacy and safety, very important for us to always remember. ChatGPT is not your therapist, and this is getting more controversial by the day. But again, don't anthropomorphize it. See it as an extension, an augmentation of our natural human capabilities, but we need to make sure that we coach our teams to be aware of how and where AI is appropriate. Class warfare, I am solidly on Team Human. I think that AI is being used daily to give access to the world's information to places where it's needed most. I think there's amazing research going on within 5 miles of where I sit right now. It's going to help us solve the problem, but it's red because potentially, there are downsides there. Lastly, the concept of singularity was developed by a gentleman who's now a distinguished fellow at Google, a guy named Ray Kurzweil, who hypothesized, 20 years ago, that we're rapidly approaching the convergence of silicon-based and carbon-based life forms, and everyone thought Ray Kurzweil was a crackpot. Um, it turns out, that idea that augmenting ourselves with silicon-based life forms or technology, it's certainly not an outrageous idea if you're an amputee who has a smart limb. Or if you're someone who's in a trial, I won't talk anything else about Neuralink, but and all of a sudden, you can control outcomes, control a computer, a keyboard, a mouse, etc., with your mind because you have an implant, or even if you're an athlete who now swims like a dolphin because you have some kind of, new age carbon fiber bathing suit. I don't know. Maybe you'd have to ask, is that me plus technology? Maybe doing something I couldn't do before. So just saying, it's okay to ask the question. Um, Not an existential threat posed by that, but it's okay to ask the question. I firmly believe what can be predicted is better left to machines, but what requires judgment or empathy or rational thinking isn't always will be better left to humans. So there will always be a need for us to train machines. Machines will never train us. Try to aggregate some of the themes from over 350 of these conversations on the podcast into very few thoughts. It's a lot of hours of conversations. People, process, and technology. I firmly believe that we're rapidly approaching what I'll call the ask economy that will replace the teleconomy. Um, all of us old timers in the field of IT service management or other forms of service delivery will recall the time when we were traffic cops. And I don't mean that in a complimentary way. We basically dictated, what tools the employees would use and where they had to be when they were using them. That sounds really antiquated, but we actually did that. Um, and we would tell them, what hours to be available. And we'd always be there to tell them when they did something wrong. It doesn't work anymore because when we have technology that's smart enough to adapt itself to the way humans work, we can also enforce the right guardrails. So we can ask our teammates, our colleagues, the people on our teams, how do you want to work? What's the way for you to be your best self? How can you be the most productive? And we can actually instrument technology to really, unlock the best of every member of our team. And that's a shift in how we think about service delivery, but we need to get comfortable making that shift. In terms of process, um, I firmly believe that within a few years, we'll think of AI as being just ambient in the workplace. Think of sensor networks collecting information constantly, not in a creepy sci-fi way, but in a way that may help you. So offices will be smart. You'll walk into maybe you're, visiting a remote office or something, and it'll know what's on your calendar, and you'll have meetings that are scheduled appropriately based on how many people are attending them, and you'll be on the VPN when you walk in. Um, and you'll be able to get in the building. You won't have to reprogram your cat card. These are just bits of friction that exist all throughout our day, just the standard operating procedure. It's going to go away. Frictionless work will come by AI being ambient in the enterprise. Um, the last one there in the technology column,
Donald Trump calls Jack.
is that
All
is that a
good.
comment? Cool.
No,
Okay.
John's accidentally scrolling on Instagram. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I'm sure there was some insight there. So in the technology column, I'll highlight one I feel quite strongly about, the last number three there. AI is the new UI and voice is the new app. So consistent with this theme of getting comfortable with technology that adapts itself to humans rather than the other way around. Really think about a time when we fundamentally have different interaction paradigms with technology. That's happening really, really rapidly. And it's okay to think about technology as your ally at work and not your adversary. Now, look, among this Zoom, we probably all have felt that way for a long time. Believe it or not, all your colleagues don't feel that way, but hopefully they will soon. So I frequently will share with groups I present to one simple and very non-technical exercise that you can take, like today, in your place of work. The impact is amazing. I've seen this transform cultures around the world in ways, frankly, I never really anticipated. Taking the pledge goes something like this. I encourage you to ask every one of your team members to say this: I will openly and enthusiastically share how and when my work product was augmented or enhanced by AI. Super simple. You can put it on an index card. A lot of us are old enough to remember what an index card was. I have to stop using that reference because I think they're out of date. But nonetheless, you can put it on an index card. And you know what happens when you ask every employee? Oh my gosh, that was a sticky note. I think that wasn't a real index card. Um, it does some amazing things. It sends a message that, we as a leadership team, we don't have all the answers, but we as a company, we do have all the answers. And so we're just going to celebrate innovation, and we're going to create a safe place where um, you as team members can educate us. And maybe once a month or, every couple of weeks, we're going to convene kind of, a meeting to celebrate, how we're innovating at work. And just someone's going to tell a story about something they did. And it may not be immediately applicable for everyone, but I guarantee you every month that story is going to be applicable for someone. And over a span of, a couple months, 6 months, nine, you're going to find people are sharing stories that are mind-blowing and they build on each other, and everyone thinks of it as like their favorite meeting of the month. Everyone's just coming together being super vulnerable, but also super enthusiastic. No more shadow AI, right? It's the opposite. And it's amazing how just asking teams to take the pledge and creating these forums to have these serendipitous, ad hoc conversations is super powerful. Um, we have templates and things that we use to support organizations that are interested in this. I'll share my contact information. Let me know if you're interested with the artifacts. I feel like it's my obligation. I talk about this podcast. Here's three examples of great guests. Those are the barcodes that go right to their um, their episodes. More Than a Glitch, a book by Meredith Broussard, who founded the field of algorithmic accountability. Tom Wheeler, absolute national hero to me. He was a former chair of the SEC, FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, um, uh, when we introduced net neutrality. He's just fascinating historian and big thinker. Techlash is his most recent book. AI Dilemma, very practical set of guidelines, 7 principles for exercising AI responsibly. Juliet Powell and Art Kleiner are two great professors at NYU. Lots more where these came from, but just if you're passionate about this stuff like I am, those are three good jumping off points. I'll close with this thought. The pace of innovation has never been faster than it was yesterday, but you better believe it will never be slower than it is today. And with that said, unless Matt and Lisa need to cane me off the stage, I would, absolutely love to explore some of these topics and hear what's on your mind.